Good evening and welcome to Mello TV. I'm your host, Nicole Hales. Thank you for joining us for this evening's discussion as we continue to analyze the findings from our Mello TV poll with pollster and CEO of Johnson Survey Research Limited, Bill Johnson. Also joining us in the discussion this evening are political commentator Linton Gordon and political analyst Paul Bourne. Gentlemen, good evening and thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Over the years, many argued that the ultimate winning of an election rests upon the favorability and approval of the party's leader. Bill, what are the numbers showing for the favorability ratings for both Andrew Holness and Dr. Peter Phillips versus the unfavorable numbers?
Okay, we asked the people of Jamaica if they, generally speaking, had a favorable or an unfavorable opinion of both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader. 76% said they have a favorable opinion of the Prime Minister, which is the second highest favorability rating that I've measured in Jamaica since I've been here. 14% had an unfavorable rating, 10% weren't sure. And in terms of the opposition leader, 34% had a favorable rating, 40% an unfavorable rating, and 26% weren't sure. Now, I think it's important to look sort of behind these numbers. And if we do, we'll find out that 94% of those who voted for the JLP in 2016 have a favorable opinion of the Prime Minister. But what I found very interesting is 59% of those who voted for the PNP in 2016 also have a favorable opinion of the Prime Minister. And 74% of those who didn't vote have a favorable opinion of the Prime Minister. In terms of Dr. Phillips, 62% of those who voted for the PNP in 2016 have a favorable opinion of him, 23% have an unfavorable opinion. So statistically, the number of PNP voters rating both of them are in effect equal. I mean, statistically, 59% for the Prime Minister, 62% with the opposition leader. This does not bode well for the opposition leader.
Bill, based on your findings, when was the last time we had a political leader with such high favorability ratings?
It was back when you were a very young person. It was in 2006 with Portia Simpson Miller in March of 2006, right after she was selected party leader of the PNP. She had a 78% favorable rating, but as you can see, these are ephemeral. 2 months later, in May, it had dropped to 64%. 2 months later, it dropped to 60%. In October of 2006, it dropped to 55%. And in January of 2007, it had dropped to 52%. It subsequently rose to about 55% in July of 2007, and then started a downward trend to the election, which I believe was held in September. She was trending downward when the election was held. And ultimately in November, after the election, we happened to do another survey, and her favorable rating was down to just about 40% at that time. So the bottom line is these favorable ratings aren't chiseled in granite.
Okay, Bill, it's interesting that you brought up the poll results for Ms. Simpson Miller. Linton, Paul, I want to bring you in here. What should these falling numbers that Portia Simpson Miller received in 2016 and they started to trend down, if Andrew Holness were to look at these numbers that were presented by Bill a short while ago, what should he do to ensure that he keeps the momentum going in his favor? Linton, let me start with you, and then Paul, you follow up.
I think his first step is to keep his party united, bring about an air of togetherness, and that the governance they are providing is not one that is fractured and involving internal competition and fight for appointments and status and position within the party. And likewise, you could you could look at the PNP over the past year and you will realize that in the first place, Dr. Phillips was not as active as you would expect the leader of the opposition to be. It turned out that he had medical challenges which were not known widely to everyone initially. Secondly, that situation is compounded by the internal strife and the party being divided between the two Peters, resulted in a close call election, and I don't think they have fully recovered from that. And there's a final point that is important, and I think that the PNP should learn from the experience of the JLP, which was out of power for some 18 years, led in the opposition by a leader who was never nationally popular in the 80s nor 90s. Now, if Peter Phillips is going down that route, he can very well stay there for 18 years and the JLP will rule for their 18 years period.
Paul?
Well, those are some good observations and analysis, but I want to take it with what my colleague left off a while ago with, and it's substantially as a result, and I've been saying to persons over some time, that the PNP stayed in power for too long. And what do I mean by that? They were careless to have actually remained in power and not look at some critical things that were going on in society. In other words, the growth of young persons, the growth of internet, the growth of social media, all those things were not placed into the PNP's discussion of politics. And as a result, it has actually haunted them. Now, when you look at Bill's number, I think fundamentally what the Prime Minister needs to do, which is very simple, it is to keep the young persons in his vision and let the young persons understand where he wants to go. Because at the moment, what is happening is that many of the young people are supporting the Prime Minister because of two things. One, he's young, and two, he has a vision for many of them. And if he keeps that going in terms of that momentum, with the other things being equal, it is hardly unlikely that his favorable ratings will actually fall below where it's at, and the possibility exists that he could be Prime Minister once more.
In a meeting just yesterday, Dr. Phillips says the party is in a state of readiness if and when election is called. With such large gap in numbers of favorability ratings, can Dr. Phillips play catch-up? Paul, going back to you.
Can Dr. Phillips play catch-up? And the answer is yes. But there is something fundamentally wrong with the image that Dr. Phillips is creating. And I'm not sure the PNP recognize it. We are in a new era, and I think Dr. Phillips's image that the PNP is trying to create and has created for some time is somewhat old. And Dr. Phillips is not recognizing that this is a young, vibrant Andrew Holness, young person representing youth versus someone representing 2 or 3 decades before Andrew Holness. And the image that Dr. Phillips is using must be changed in order for him to catch up. That's one. 2, the PNP has been placing much emphasis on corruption, and Jamaicans are not putting much emphasis on corruption. All the research that has been done are showing that corruption is 5th to 6th in terms of Jamaicans' view on what this important thing is. And I think the PNP is putting too much emphasis on a horse that is about dying. And they need to look at the real issue, which is youth versus aging.
Now, Dr. Phillips spoke at a Region 1 and Region 2 meeting yesterday with delegates. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We don't get to pick what is going to happen, whether they're going to keep one, the general, or whether they're going to keep the local, or whether they're going to keep both together. Our purpose is to be prepared and to win whatever they do. If it's 2 in 1, we're going to win the 2. If it is 1 for the parliament, we're going to win that 1. If it is 1 for local, we're going to win that 1. We have already our 63 candidates at the parliamentary level. We have some good candidates down here in the West. We have a good slate, and it's a winning slate in the West and in the rest of the country.
Listening to Dr. Phillips a short while ago, Linton, he said that if an election is called, whether it be the local or general election, he's prepared. His party is ready. But how much has the recent PNP leadership race affected the PNP? There's still a rift with the Peter Bunting-led Rise United comparative to Dr. Phillips's One PNP.
Yes, there is still a rift among the members. There might be effort at the leadership level to portray unity, but I think that there are several persons who are turned off and who are insisting that without a change of the leadership of the PNP, they are not going to be supporting the party. The danger that the PNP is running into, I don't think it's a matter of age between Dr. Phillips and Andrew Holness. It is a matter of perception, policies, and a generation of interest among all members of the society. The young, the youth, the old, the middle age, everyone. There is a fall off and a belief that the PNP has nothing to offer. But let me caution the JLP against something. For years, the PNP enjoyed the luxury of winning and started to declare Jamaica PNP country when they were leading and winning elections. That turned around within a year, so that, as Bill said, it is not cast in granite and anything can happen. So the Prime Minister has to be cautious and has to be careful. I agree that corruption has never been an outstanding matter that generates opposition and a turnoff in Jamaica. Unfortunately, the view expressed by a prominent intellectual, Jamaican intellectual, that Jamaicans' hearts are laced with larceny is not far from the truth.
Paul, your thoughts on the issue, still staying on the matter of whether the rift in the PNP leadership race will affect the PNP's chances and Dr. Phillips's chances at the polls if a general election is called?
I'm going to put it this way. If there was not that competition, Dr. Phillips would have been dead. That competition has done significant for Dr. Phillips. But in terms of a holistic perspective, Dr. Phillips still is far behind Andrew and the GLB in terms of vision, relationship with the normal constituents, which has been a substantial part of the problem with Dr. Phillips. And persons do not see Dr. Phillips as a good leader and, by extension, Prime Minister. And that is where the matter comes down to. And as such, I'm saying there's need for a change in leadership.
Bill, I want to bring in the discussion. In 2016, you indicated earlier that a percentage of the persons who voted for the PNP gave Andrew Holness a favorability rating in your most recent poll. Expound on that for us.
Oh, yes. So those who voted for the PNP in 2016, 59% have a favorable opinion of the Prime Minister. 32% have an unfavorable opinion. So the Prime Minister's favorable rating among PNP voters is almost as high as Peter Phillips's favorable rating among PNP voters, which was 62%. If I could just segue very quickly into corruption, just a little teaser. Next Monday, we'll be answering the question, which of the two parties the Jamaicans think is the most honest and least corrupt. So I think it's very topical that we were discussing that this evening.
Linton, will this season of favorability for Prime Minister Holding fade with time? And did the handling of COVID-19 contribute to this favorability?
I think it contributed to it significantly. And in any event, prior to the arrival of COVID-19, there was an air of optimism in the country and a belief that the country was going in the right direction and that there was a genuine effort being made by the Prime Minister and his team to bring some progress, some success, and some betterment to citizens of the country. And where that feeling is widespread, favorability will be high, and that's the result.
When we look at Dr. Phillips's favorability number of 40%, it's pretty low. However, the percentage that is not sure is 26%. If the party is able to convince that percentage to come over in his favor, it'll be about 60% favorability for Dr. Phillips. The question I want to pose to Paul and then Linton, is it possible and do they have time to convince the undecided population?
Well, in every political organization, including that of the United States, the matter of favorability is a constant. So it would be fallacious to ever think that you will be able to convince persons from a 26% favorability or even 40% favorability to zero. It is just not possible. So I am saying where the issue is, and I'm going back to the issue, people are not convinced that Peter Phillips is a good prime minister representation for them. And that is where the matter is. It is not so much that the matter is unfavorably low or unfavorably high. No, when Dr. Phillips can convince the average Jamaican that, listen, I am a leader, I am representing you, then he has a chance. But what Prime Minister Andrew Holness has done, which is what the PNP were not doing, is that he has given Jamaican youth vigor and a perception that he is their leader. And that is the advantage he has over the PNP, and particularly Dr. Peter Phillips.
Linton?
Yes, I agree with most of what has been said. What I would add is this. We should not put Dr. Phillips' problem to his age. It is not an age factor. It's a lack of leadership quality emerging from Phillips. Phillips is a technical person, perhaps good at being a minister, but I think that having emerged from ministerial responsibility onto the platform where he's looking to be the ultimate leader, prime minister, it has turned out that the Peter principle is there. Ironically, he's not ready to go beyond that. And the best example of that is after taking over the party following the 2016 election, he basically went to sleep. He wasn't there, he wasn't generating interest, he wasn't showing a determination to get back in power. As my friend said, he came alive when he was challenged by Bunting. Prior to that, he was all but asleep. And I don't think he's recovering from that period, and I don't see anywhere where he's out and about generating that interest.
It's interesting that you made mention of Dr. Phillips's personality and the PNP, as you said, going to sleep. But some pundits would say it's an unfair comparison. It's like comparing the outgoing personality of the former PNP president, Mrs. Portia Simpson Mello, with that of Dr. Phillips. Persons can say that persons have not given Dr. Phillips a chance to show his potential and consolidate his leadership.
Well, he got a chance. He became leader of the opposition, and there were so many things on the national scene that he was absent from, or there was no vigorous and determined opposition being present. It just wasn't there. And I think that has gone a far way in demoralizing members of the PNP to the extent that just about the same number of them, our percentage, are seeing the Prime Minister in a more favorable light than Phillips. And that also is an indictment on his leadership, whether we like it or not.
I agree wholeheartedly with that perspective. In fact, what is happening with Dr. Phillips is that he has not recognized that young people are no longer of an age where they are PNP dieharded, but they are looking out for their progress and their development in life. So therefore, what is going to happen, and I'm projecting this, is that the PNP will lose the election on two grounds. One, they have taken young people for granted, and two, they have not given young persons a vision. Now, Dr. Phillips got ample chance to do what he should have done, but he was caught sleeping at the wheel. And a matter of fact, I'm not saying that he crashed, but somewhere between crashing and somewhere else, Dr. Phillips was caught. And when it was late, and when I'm saying late here, I mean that when the PNP realizes that the JLP was ahead, it was too late for them. And what is happening now is that PNP is playing catch up, and that is too late, too long gone.
Bill, in terms of the approval ratings, what are the numbers showing?
If I could just get back to this last point quickly, and then I'll get into the approval. I've been sitting here trying to think of what the message of the PNP is, and I can't think of it. And I don't know if my two other commentators can, but I just think one of the things the PNP has to do is present a coherent message in terms of why people should vote for them, other than the fact that they're not the JLP. Now, getting back to the job approval, besides asking favorability, we asked people if they, generally speaking, approve or disapprove of the job that the Prime Minister and the opposition leader were doing. 81% said they approve of the job that the Prime Minister is doing. That's 81%, which is the highest I've seen. 12% disapprove, 7% aren't sure. In terms of the opposition leader, 32% approve of the job he's doing, 41% disapprove, and 27% aren't sure. Now, once again, of those who voted for the PNP in 2016, 65% approve of the job that the Prime Minister is doing. 60% approve of the job that Peter Phillips is doing. Once again, that is not a very good sign for the PNP.
Paul, Linton?
It's a challenge. And why I'm actually saying it's a challenge here, because as I said before, Dr. Phillips was caught sleeping at the wheels. Now, when Dr. Phillips should have actually put in place a policy and a plan to show that he's a viable alternative, he was not here. He was somewhere sleeping, somewhere doing something else. Now, when PNP can actually say they're approving of the Prime Minister that high, it says something. But one should be cautious in interpreting those figures. And when I'm saying cautious here, cautious means it does not mean those persons will be voting for the JLP. But what it could mean is that they could abstain voting for the PNP and therefore create further problems for the PNP. When you look at the approval range of 81% of persons saying they approve of the job the Prime Minister is doing, that indicates a high level of confidence. Now, what I've been doing over the past, say, 6 months, is I've been talking to the average Jamaicans and asking young persons, how do you see the Prime Minister? And a matter of fact, I've met young persons who say, Paul, this is what you ought to be doing now, is wearing only green shirt. Because the Prime Minister is doing so good. We are proud to be Jamaicans. And that is what is happening with those figures. People are proud of what the Prime Minister is doing in terms of his job. And the PNP is caught. Up to now, the PNP does not have a message that they are selling to the Jamaican people. And that is what the problem is.
Linton?
Yes, it's obvious that support has migrated from the PNP to the JLP, in particular to the Prime Minister. And it's leader against leader. And obviously, Phillips has not generated any support, any admiration, or any belief that he is now fit, suitable to be Prime Minister. And that, again, is a clear sign that he's not accepted or seen as someone who should be put in that position.
All right, Bill, what can we expect tomorrow? Our poll continues.
Tomorrow, we're going to find out if the people of Jamaica think Peter Phillips is past his shelf life. And we have some very interesting questions and some very interesting responses. I think everybody is going to find it fascinating tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. And that's our program for this evening. As you heard from our pollster, Bill Johnson, tomorrow we'll look at whether or not Peter Phillips should step down as leader of the opposition. We'll also be looking at the favorability and approval rating of Peter Bunting, as well as who should lead the opposition. In our program this evening, we had with us pollster Bill Johnson, political commentator Linton Gordon, and political analyst Paul Bourne. This has been the Mello TV poll. Thank you for joining us. I'm Nicole Hales.